What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the driveway, where this week the boys and girls at Toyota have sent us over a hot hatchback that I personally have been itching to work with since it debuted in 2018. So now it's here and it's bright blue and bitchin'. It's the brand new 2019 Toyota Corolla Hatchback. All right, everyone, so let's get to it. And first off, before we jump in this thing and fire it up and start talking about all the cool features that this thing has, I just have to draw your attention to this car's exterior for a moment. It's known as Blue Flame, and for those who were paying attention when this car was debuted, again around mid-2018 or so, this is the exact color that they launched this aggressive-looking hatchback in. And again, to me, I think it just fits this car and its personality absolutely perfectly. But there's no time like the present, so we'll go ahead and jump inside real quick and bring this baby to life. This particular car we have is the XSE, the Extreme Sports Edition. Now, my test car does come with keyless access as standard, being the more loaded of two trims for this new hatchback. It features the same Toyota key we've seen so many times before. You've got lock, unlock, you've got the panic button, and the hidden key blade here in the lower right-hand corner of the fob. And that can be used to do things like lock and unlock your glove box. You can unlock and lock the doors should the battery or the car lose power as well. But being the fact it's keyless, just have the key in the vehicle anywhere, put your foot on the brake pedal, hit the button up here on the dashboard, and now, if someone had told me just a couple years ago or so that a Toyota Corolla could be fun, exciting, it could grab your attention anywhere that it goes, and it could really set your pulse racing when you get behind the wheel, I probably would have told you to look a little bit elsewhere, because I'll be honest, the Toyota Corolla has never been anywhere close to the top of my list of cars that fit that criteria. But now that this car is offered in this wicked little hatchback style and been given the design treatment that it has, my thought process has actually changed entirely. I am loving this new Corolla hatch, and it just starts with the design. Starting here at the front, we have full LED headlights, and I mean full LED everything. So the light guides are LED, your turn signals, your high beams and low beams. This car does come standard with the auto high beam assist, and of course this weird angular gloss black surround that trails off to a point about midway up the front end or so. Now, the other things that I've also noted is the fact that the grille isn't too big. On a lot of Toyota's other cars, I've always complained that the grille is a little too large, but judging by the proportional sizes of this car, not only in width, but also in length and other things like that, it really does seem that the grille is true to proportion. So good job on that one, Toyota. And a couple of other things to note, we do have LED fog lights down here below. We also have these cool kind of fang-like projections, and it just adds to that sort of aggression factor here. And one final note, we do have what Toyota calls a radar badge, because not only is this badge used for things like the dynamic radar cruise control, but it's also used with the updated Toyota Safety Sense 2.0 with things like the new pre-collision system with pedestrian detection. Now, when you look at it from the side, the Corolla hatchback does seem to be about the size of what most typical hatchback buyers expect. This new model stretches 170 inches exactly from nose to tail, and it rides on a 103.3-inch wheelbase. Now, speaking of the wheels, getting down here for a second, this XSE trim provides some of the coolest wheels that I've ever seen equipped to a Corolla of any kind. These are 18-inch machine-faced and dark gray painted aluminum alloy wheels wrapped in Yokohama Summer Performance tires. We do have four-wheel disc brakes all the way around with a McPherson strut suspension in the front and a multi-link independent suspension setup in the rear. Now, when you look at the Corolla hatchback from the rear, I feel like Toyota took a page from the design book from another car that I'm actually fond of these days, which is the second generation Mazda 3 hatchback. And I really just say that due to things like the shape and sort of inner workings of these LED taillights here, and also things like this curved body line, which follows the underside of this rear glass here. But other than that, this is Toyota's own design. Now, like I mentioned, the taillights, these are full LEDs, so LED reverse lights, turn signals. You've got your LED light bar going around the outside and the LED brake light itself. A couple of other noteworthy things: you have the red XSE badge letting people know you're actually driving a sporty Corolla hatch, and you also have things such as your rear view camera hidden here under the Toyota logo, but that doesn't include anything like rear parking sensors or anything like that, but that's no big deal. This car is not priced to compete with higher end hatchbacks. But you also have things such as these fake exhaust tips, which are a little bit of a letdown. Maybe some true dual exhaust would have kind of woken up that extreme factor for this XSE trim, but instead the exhaust actually exits underneath the bumper here in a single outlet here on the lower right. Now, to anyone out there who has actually said that a sedan is more practical than a hatchback, you might want to think again, because believe it or not, this Corolla hatchback that we have here is more practical than its sedan sibling. So we'll go ahead and open the hatch here and I'll show you what I mean. Now, at first glance, there was one small hindrance, which was the floor. It seems a little bit high up for a hatchback like this, and when you have this little cargo cover in place, it really doesn't look like you have much, but the numbers on paper suggest a little bit differently. The sedan can only hold 13 cubic feet of space, whereas this car, even with the seats up, starts at just under 18 cubic feet of space, and that really has to do with the opening here. You have this huge opening to store a little bit larger things, but I was only able to fit about maybe a medium to slightly large size suitcase back here before things got a little tight. However, if you fold that second row of seats down, that suddenly extends to about 23.5 cubic feet of space. So again, if you're thinking about practicality and you really want to put a whole lot of stuff back here, you might want to look at the hatch before you look at the four-door. From exterior to interior, it's now time to see what this near $27,000 test car of mine has to offer for people who want a little hatchback with a whole lot of options. And the first thing really of note is how sort of minimalistic this interior is. And I'm not saying it's bare bones by any means, because we have things such as the giant infotainment display, the dual zone climate controls, and all kinds of stuff like that. But things like the shape of the dash, there's a nice open area here for your passenger because it curves away so sharply here. We have kind of the leatherette-like material with the simulated stitching here going through the middle, and then how it flows down and sort of pinches off and meets this lower center part down here in the middle. Now, there are a couple of things that I'm not so big a fan on, but we'll touch on those at their appropriate time. Another thing that I'm really liking is this steering wheel. It's a little bit of a different design compared to what we've seen in some of the other Toyota cars we've tested, like the Highlander, the Avalon, and the new Camry recently, mainly down to things like this new split spoke down here at the bottom. And it feels actually a little smaller here in this Corolla hatch. It doesn't feel so large and sort of oversized, if you will. Now, because this is the XSE, we do have things such as a leather trimmed outside rim, and we also do have these subtle grip extensions up here at 10 and 2, and they're not too angular, not too big and bulky, and they do provide a nice feel here in your hands. And in typical Toyota fashion, we have all the usual controls. Over here on the left, the arrow pad here controls the thin film transistor display that houses not only your speedometer, which can change color, and we'll talk about that more here in a bit, but also other relevant information and things like that. You also do have things such as your hands-free Bluetooth, voice recognition, hands-free radio controls, and so on, and also typical functions for the dynamic radar cruise control, which is this little circle over here, and this distance sensor button up top, but also things such as the lane departure warning with active steering assist, all of which are pretty much standard feature on a lot of Toyota's cars these days. Now, you do also have paddle shifters in this one as well, being the fact that mine is the automatic version, although I prefer the manual if I'm going to buy one of these. But the paddles are very responsive. They have a nice pull to them, and they do feel very nice in your hands, but the sound of them, though, when you pull, they just sound a little bit plasticky to me, but that's just kind of me being more nitpicky than anything else. If you look to the left of the column, you do have a giant lever here for the tilting and telescoping steering column. Pretty standard stuff these days as well. And then over here to the left, we have a giant row of blank buttons, so I'm not exactly sure why all of those are there. But nevertheless, you do have one button in this test car of mine, which again is for the auto high beam assist. And then you have a little click wheel over here on the left, which controls things such as your interior instrumentation dimming. So now moving over to the center stack for a bit, this is where most of the options are actually located here on my test car. For an extra $1,600, we have this beautiful 8-inch touchscreen display, which the screen itself is standard, but the dynamic navigation with things like what Toyota calls dynamic points of interest are all part of the options list. Now, as far as the navigation system itself, it's just like a lot of other Toyota products I've tested, and the graphics are fairly rudimentary and it gets the job done. One thing I found rather humorous though, if you can see all these little dots and stuff, as my finger accidentally touches the screen here, all these little dots are kind of like breadcrumbs, and I find it rather amusing that it basically shows you where you've been. As you can see, we've been using Highway 59 here, one of the main arteries in and out of the Houston area, quite a lot. Now, as far as everything else, we'll just go to the home screen here for a minute, and it's just like a couple of the cars that we've seen before. You can swipe right, and that automatically brings up things such as your Entune app suite with the new Entune 3.0 system, the hands-free Bluetooth, which actually I found out that the Bluetooth is part of the options list with this upgraded navigation system and sound package. More on the sound part here in just a moment. You also have things such as points of interest. This system is Apple CarPlay compatible, so no Android Auto in here. So unfortunately, if you have your Samsung Galaxy S9 or the new S10 coming up or whatever, you can't use it with this one just yet. So I'm kind of disappointed in that, but nevertheless, it still is a very usable system nonetheless. Now, when it comes to the sound part, this is where I kind of feel that the younger generation is really going to enjoy this car, because this thing packs an 8-speaker JBL premium audio system. And let me just say, with the interior of this car being as small as it is, the bass is extremely clear, and well, let me just let you take a listen to it. So once you're done filling your ears with all kinds of cool tunes through that JBL audio system, there really is not much else to go through here in the infotainment display. However, there are a couple things of note. First off, you may notice that I have the screen now in this beautiful black and red color scheme, but that is not the standard Toyota display. Instead, if you want to change this, you can actually go into what is called theme settings, and it's just within the general settings system here, and you can change between white and blue, white and gray, black and blue, or as my personal favorite is, the black and red. Now, the white with blue is the standard Toyota display, and honestly, it's a bit bright, especially driving at night, so the red and black is a little bit easier on my eyes at all times of driving, so hence the reason why I leave it in that particular setting. Apart from that, the only other thing to worry about up here is your rear view camera, so I'll put the car in reverse here, and as you can see, we do have guidance lines, although they don't offer trajectory, which means they don't sway back and forth, and as I mentioned on the outside, we don't have any form of rear parking assist sensors, so there's no beeping or anything like that when you get close to an object like the fence that we're sitting in front of right now. Once you move below that 8-inch screen, however, you get to, again, a very minimalistic climate control setup here, and it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand it. You've got dual temperature zones here on either side. You've got the button to turn the system into automatic mode, as well as the button to synchronize the front temperatures here, so you can either use them independent of each other, or you can use them both at the same time using just one knob. Apart from that, you have a couple of different buttons down here, and they are on the small side, but again, nothing too out of the ordinary. You have a button to turn the system off. You can activate either your front or rear defrost, as well as the heated exterior mirrors. You have the eco mode for the heating and air conditioning, which basically means it puts the system in a mode that doesn't draw too much energy away from the engine and ruin that near 40 mile per gallon rating that this car has. Now, you can also change the fan speeds here in the middle. You got your climate zones, introducing the AC, as well as air conditioning recycling, and just turning on full AC all the way over here on the far right. Now, as you come down here to the center console, again, this is where I have one of my little gripes, and really, it's just a small nitpicky thing, and that is the placement of things like these heated seat switches and the location of the optional Qi wireless charging pad. That's a part of that $1,600 upgrade package that I mentioned earlier. That includes this wireless charging pad back here. Now, I would recommend using the heated seats and this wireless charging pad while you're stationary, but if you happen to be driving and you want to put your phone up here, it can be a bit of a reach. reach, or even just to use these heated seat controls up here. As you move down the center console, you have a nice little trim of that more type of rubbery leatherette type of material here, which isn't really bad. It provides a nice accent and kind of breaks up the gray and blackness that you get here in the middle. But now we move to this gear selector. This is for the brand new eCVT. As far as the selector itself, it's got a nice notchiness to it, and you do have the manual mode here with 10 simulated gears. That's right, 10 simulated manual gears that you can go through here. And again, you push up to go up a gear, pull down to go down a gear, or again, like I said, you can use the paddles up here on the steering wheel. As far as everything else, you do have a traction control button as well as a sport mode, which really does bring this car to life. And personally, I like driving this car in sport mode. It just feels that much more sharper, and again, doesn't really feel like a boring rental Corolla that you might think of when the name is mentioned. You hit the sport button and your display up here in your gauge cluster actually turns red, or at least the speedometer does, and that to me just brings that little extra bit of something to this Corolla's driving experience. As you move back from that, you only have a couple of other things to worry about. You have the auto brake hold down here. It does exactly what it says. You put your foot on the brake with the system active, and when you come to a complete stop, it holds the car in place without even touching the brake pedal, and then when you want to set off again, just press the accelerator, it deactivates the auto hold, and you're off and running again. And then you also have the automatic electronic parking brake here, so when you put the car in park, this parking brake automatically activates without you having to touch anything. As you move back from that, you do have a couple of sizable cup holders here. As you can see, I've got my Taco Bell Pepsi here resting comfortably in the front, and as you can see, it holds pretty much anything. It actually does provide a nice amount of space for your drinks here in the middle. And then as you come towards the back, we do have a rather small center console here in the middle with a nice felt bottom at the base. You have one 12-volt outlet and one USB charging port here in the middle, which means you really only have one place that you can charge a phone, which is kind of a little bit of a letdown. Maybe one kind of up here under the dash or something would help a little bit more for multiple occupants, but at the same time, it's there if you need it. Now, if you're the type of person that also enjoys taking your friends around, then unfortunately you may want to look at the sedan first if you want to accommodate even moderately sized people here in the rear. Now, I have that driver's seat exactly where I would have it if I was driving this vehicle. And again, I'm a taller guy, 6'1", and if I try to get in the back here, as you can see, I have a little bit of a difficult time. Not so much with entry and exit because it's perfectly fine. I can slide in here with no problem, but more so in terms of legroom. As you can see, my knees are punched directly in the driver's back. So unless you have a shorter driver, taller folks aren't going to be the most comfortable occupants here in the rear. Now, as far as everything else, you do have 60/40 split fold rear seats. Your little triggers are up there on the upper corners of each of the seats. And you also have this nice little fold down armrest here with a couple of sizable cup holders to go along with it. Other than that, you just have a couple of leather-bound mat pockets back here, as well as a slightly raised headliner here in the back, again to accommodate for taller folks in terms of headroom, which is nice. But again, I wouldn't recommend sitting back here if you're a taller person like myself with a taller driver up front. Now, one of the things that surprises me more and more day by day is the fact that cars like this little Corolla hatch are suddenly becoming a lot more safer vehicles. Now, I'm not saying that they're the safest thing on the road, so don't go out and buy a small hatchback like this thinking that you're going to be better off than a mid-sized family car or SUV, but I am saying that Toyota has really done wonders when assuring people that smaller cars can still be safe. I mean, we have 7 airbags in here, so we have front impact, side curtain, and side impact airbags, but we also again have that updated Toyota Safety Sense 2.0 system. Now, we have a lot of familiar things again, like that dynamic radar cruise control, the lane departure warning with active steering assist, and that pre-collision system with pedestrian detection, but we also have a couple of new things such as road sign detection, so things like speed limit signs and other warnings will show up here in that centralized display in your gauge cluster where your speedometer is located, but we also have ones like lane trace detection. So that basically means if you get too close to the side of a lane or the side of the road, it will automatically detect that and either activate the steering assist or it will shout an alert at you that lets you know you're getting a little too close. Other than that, there really is no other data to provide as far as crash test ratings here on this new Corolla hatch, being that the car we've been given doesn't display any kind of crash test ratings from the IIHS or any other companies like that. But overall, judging by how much safety is located in this car, I would say that that if you perhaps are someone a little younger and you like to go fast and you want a sporty ride, don't just think of it as a sporty ride, but also as a safe one as well. So up until this point, we've seen how cool and sporty this thing looks and all the cool features that it has, but it still begs the question, how sporty and fun is it when you get it out on the road? For starters, being that this is the XSE, the Extreme Sports Edition, let's talk about some power figures. You're only looking at 168 horsepower and 151 pound-feet of torque from a brand new 2-liter direct and port fuel-injected 4-cylinder engine with things like double overhead cams and the company's variable valve timing with intelligence. Now, bearing those power figures in mind, you're only pushing around a car that weighs just under, if not right at, around 3,000 pounds. Now, I will say that that figure is specific to this test car with its new CVT transmission. You get one of these with a 6-speed manual, it's going to be even lighter than that. So, a little bit of a tip for anybody who's looking to get one of these cars for its more sporty driving characteristics. Now, when you talk about sporty, a CVT transmission doesn't necessarily sound like the best option. I mean, even if you're going to buy an automatic one of these, I would say that something like a 6, 7, or 8-speed automatic would be perfectly fine. However, the CVT in this car is a little bit different, and I touched on it just briefly before, but basically how it works is you have what Toyota calls a launch first gear, which means that instead of that rubber bandy kind of sluggish performance that you might expect from other CVTs, this one, up until you get out of first gear, behaves like a normal automatic. And when you give it the beans in first gear, it almost kind of reminds me of the punch I got from one of this car's predecessors, which was the 05 and 06 Corolla XSE. Now, granted, that car was ultra sporty. It was a lot lighter than this, and it could rev to about 9,000 RPMs or so, or even, as Vegeta would say, over 9,000. But in this car, it only revs to about 6,700 RPM, so a little bit less in terms of the fun, high revving, and spirited factor that you might expect from a hot hatch. Fuel economy is actually pretty reasonable. 30 in the city and 38 on the highway for this automatic version, and of course that varies when you get the manual transmission as well. But on a different note, one thing I've been impressed with this whole time is that even though this is a small car, and small cars aren't necessarily known for being at least the most comfortable cars in my opinion, this one actually is. Number one, thanks to the fact that the seats are not only half leather and half cloth, but it's where the materials are positioned. If you may or may not be able to notice, the cloth section in the middle of these seats is positioned around the middle of my back or so, and it goes around underneath the top of my legs. Now, that means that the middle part of this seat, where your sort of key touch places are on your body, means that it's being cradled in something a little bit softer than some kind of faux leathery / kind of fake leather feeling material. The other benefit is that in this car, I have a power driver's seat, which really it's not that big a deal, but being the fact that I'm a bit taller and my legs are kind of long and lanky, it's nice to have some support underneath my legs so they don't just fall asleep after only a few minutes of driving. There are a couple of cons with this car's interior though, and it mainly revolves around things like the 18-inch wheels on the outside with those low-profile tires and the fact that this interior is rather small. The road noise in this car can get a bit intrusive. It's not loud and overbearing. I mean, it doesn't give you a headache after driving for like 20 minutes in comparison to like my Elantra Sport, for example, which is atrocious on road noise. But it's very much like a typical Toyota product. I mean, I'm cruising along now at about 35 miles an hour on these wet, rain-soaked streets here, and it's perfectly quiet. It's comfortable. I don't feel like I have to raise my voice very much, and it just feels like a nice, composed little car. But if you get it out on the highway and start getting up to some of the higher speeds, the road noise sort of kind of gets a little boomy and a little echoey in here, so maybe some sound deadening would probably be a little bit of a positive for this car. So there's one thing I know you guys have probably been wanting me to try, and that is, what is the difference between when it's in normal mode like it is now and when you put it in sport mode? Well, I'll go ahead and knock the transmission over into manual here. I'll put it in sport, and it is a little wet, but let's just see how she does. Now, like I said, the way this CVT is geared really does make it feel almost like a normal automatic transmission. And as an enthusiast, I mentioned this in my last review with the Camry, the CVT normally doesn't trick your senses into thinking that you're in a normal automatic car. But in this, it does, because even though I was just in, you know, if you're in drive, for example, it doesn't have that stay up at the red line feeling. It actually will simulate the gears still just in the normal drive mode. And therefore, it makes you feel like you're driving a normal automatic car, which I absolutely love. Now we're getting ready to come up to just a few kind of casual corners here, and this brings me to what I feel is kind of another Achilles heel of this car being the quote-unquote extreme sports edition, and that is the handling. Even when you're in sport mode, it does kind of firm up this electric power steering ever so slightly, but it's not what I would call responsive. So the initial turn in is a little numb and it's a little lackluster, but it does hold its own when it comes to driving in a little bit more of a spirited fashion. But in the end, I really have to say that the Corolla hatch proves that you can have a car with a name like Toyota Corolla that doesn't really evoke much of a sense of fun or excitement, and actually have it turn your impressions completely around. That is, if you're into that sort of thing. Now, if you're not, the hatch still is offered in a lesser trim for those people who just want the hatchback lifestyle but don't want all the sporty fun bells and whistles. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the brand new 2019 Corolla hatch, and if you have, please do give this video a thumbs up, and also be sure to click that subscribe button for many more videos like this and more to come in the future. But as always, another thanks goes out to the folks at Toyota USA for lending us this wicked little hot blue hatchback to drive for an entire week. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see y'all next time. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.